Hey, Flo here again. Gonna read some Bible. Hey, Alameen. Okay, so today has quite a few different passages. I don't know if it's necessarily like overall long, but I had a hard time like queuing it up just because there's so many little chunks. So we're gonna read Exodus 22 to 24, Matthew 14, 13 to 36, Mark 6, 30 to 56, and Luke 9, 1 to 17. So, a couple half chapters or 3 half chapters in the New Testament, and then just some Exodus chapters. Probably the longest stream title I've ever had. I think one of the platforms it was too long. I had to cut it down because there's so many different passages. All right, so let's see, get my Bible app going here. I don't remember if I mentioned, but I've been thinking about making a Bible app. Like, I don't really want to. Like, it's kind of the same idea. Like, lately I've been thinking of there's just too many Bibles in English. Like, I don't know. I don't know if I can say that definitively. That's just my opinion. I think there's too many. Um, it's nice to have a few different translations, but I feel like there's like 30 or 40 different ones. There's just too many choices. uh, anyway, but along the same lines, there's too many Bible apps already, so I don't feel like I should make another one. But there's like the purpose that I want a Bible app for, there isn't one that really checks all the boxes. It's mainly having one that presents really well on stream, like it shows the passages all in one window or just has various options. Like the thing that I dislike the most is this scrolling that I have to do. It's just, I don't know, it's hard to look at. I would imagine if you're watching, it's probably kind of hard to keep your eye on where I'm at. And I'd like to have a thing that can have like a few verses in a screen and then switch. But I don't want to have to like cut and paste all these into little chunks, like into a PowerPoint presentation or something like that. I want an app that automatically fits as many verses as can fit per screen and I don't know, just a few other things. I want to be able to style it really specifically with like CSS or something. Because I don't really love how most of the Bible apps look, but I don't know. I don't know if I'll do that. I doubt it, but I have been thinking about it. I did a little bit of research over the last couple of days on Bible script formats. So there's this format that translators use, and a lot of Bible apps can use this format. It's called USFM, and don't ask me what those letters stand for, but universal something, probably universal format manuscript or something. But it's basically like when Bible translators are working on a new language or a new Bible version, they can use this text markup language, kind of like something similar to like XML or HTML, but it's a lot simpler with a bunch of extra codes to signify kind of typographical things. Anyway, I looked into that language a little bit. I might try to parse some of those codes because the cool thing about the Berean Standard Bible that I use, it's kind of an open format, public domain, and so they release all of their text in a wide variety of formats like a PDF, Word document, EPUB, like a book, digital book format, and they have an Amazon Kindle version. They have an Excel spreadsheet, so like each verse is on a separate line. They have text, just like plain text where each verse is in a separate line, and then they have this USFM, I think those are the letters, format that I was talking about. Maybe some others, but it's really cool because if you want to write some kind of Bible app or just load the script into a website and kind of style it a certain way, there's a lot of different options that you can do that with. That's why I'm tempted to kind of play with that a little bit. But yeah, my desire or passion for programming and development has decreased a lot over the years, but something like that does kind of appeal to me because like a long time ago and for many years I've had interest in Bible text. Like when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I wrote out the Bible, like just both with pen on paper in a journal, and also like typed it on, like a long time ago I typed it on typewriters, and then once computers were more of a thing, I typed out chapters from the Bible in a program, and like a long time ago, even back in the MS DOS days, like just did all sorts of stuff like that. So that kind of stuff appeals to me. So there's a chance I might play with that, but knowing my motivation lacking in that area, I doubt it'll happen. But anyway, I normally do this kind of vlog stuff at the end of the stream rather than the beginning, but just kind of I want to say the stuff when I remember it. And so I often have things on my mind at the beginning, and I kind of would like to do the prayer and get straight into the reading first, but I guess I'm not too strict about a format. Anyway, all that said, I think I will get into the reading now. Sorry for all the nerd boring stuff. Most people have no idea what I'm talking about, but and I may never end up doing any of that stuff I'm talking about, but something I've been thinking about. Anyway, let's get into the readings. We have a fair amount to do on week 8, day 1. Starting a new week on Sunday, so yep, let's go for it. Dear Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for a little bit of light and hope in our lives in spite of surrounding darkness, Lord, like this little lamp that I keep going on my streams. I pray that you would help us to focus our eyes on that kind of light, not a physical burning light like that, but to symbolize you, Lord. It's kind of weird that you choose to symbolize yourself and your truth by things like that, because you're so much bigger than that. You're so much bigger than a small lamp. And it does seem like that in the world, that you're a small candle and then there's all this crazy darkness around, but that's just because we have chosen to focus on the wrong things in the world. The darkness looks so big and so scary, but you are light, and your truth is powerful, and your existence and your size are amazing. And like I imagine the entire universe, I believe it's probably infinite, and yet that's just a speck compared to you and your infinity. And I think all of this is just a small glimpse of your glory, and I pray that you would help us to understand that and not to be afraid of the enemy and his tactics and his schemes. Might seem like he's on the winning side, but he's going to lose and you're going to win. You've already won. Help us to have hope in that. Forgive me when I so often lose hope, but I do thank you for allowing me to lose hope for a moment so that I run to you in those dark times. And yeah, whatever you're doing, I guess I'll be part of it, even though it's going to probably hurt a lot of the times. Just help us to submit. Pray that you would help me to read clearly, and that your truth would come through in spite of my lacking ability to speak. And yeah, thanks for all that. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay. Exodus chapter 22. More about rules about oxen and stuff. If a man steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters or sells it, he must repay 5 oxen for an ox and 4 sheep for a sheep. If a thief is caught breaking in and is beaten to death, no one shall be guilty of bloodshed. But if it happens after sunrise, there is guilt for his bloodshed. A thief must make full restitution. If he has nothing, he himself shall be sold for his theft. If what was stolen is actually found alive in his possession, whether ox or donkey or sheep, he must pay back double. If a man grazes his livestock in a field or vineyard and allows them to stray so that they graze in someone else's field, he must make restitution from the best of his own field or vineyard. If a fire breaks out and spreads to thorn bushes so that it consumes stacked or standing grain, or the whole field, the one who started the fire must make full restitution. If a man gives his neighbor money or goods for safekeeping, and they are stolen from the neighbor's house, the thief, if caught, must pay back double. If the thief is not found, the owner of the house must appear before the judges to determine whether he has taken his neighbor's property. In all cases of illegal possession of an ox, a donkey, a sheep, a garment, or any lost item that someone claims, "This is mine," both parties shall bring their cases before the judges. The one whom the judges find guilty must pay back double to his neighbor. If a man gives a donkey, an ox, or a sheep or any other animal to be cared for by his neighbor, but it dies or is injured or stolen while no one is watching, an oath before the Lord shall be made between the parties to determine whether or not the man has taken his neighbor's property. The owner must accept the oath and require no restitution. But if the animal was actually stolen from the neighbor, he must make restitution to the owner. If the animal was torn to pieces, he shall bring it as evidence. He need not make restitution for the torn carcass. If a man borrows an animal from his neighbor and it is injured or dies while its owner is not present, he must make full restitution. If the owner was present, no restitution is required. If the animal was rented, the fee covers the loss. If a man seduces a virgin who is not pledged in marriage and sleeps with her, he must pay the full dowry for her to be his wife. If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, the man still must pay an amount comparable to the bridal price of a virgin. You must not allow a sorceress to live. Whoever lies with an animal must surely be put to death. If anyone sacrifices to any god other than the Lord alone, he must be set apart for destruction. You must not exploit or oppress a foreign resident, for you yourselves were foreigners in the land of Egypt. You must not mistreat any widow or orphan. If you do mistreat them and they cry out to me in distress, I will surely hear their cry. My anger will be kindled, and I will kill you with the sword. Then your wives will become widows, and your children will be fatherless. If you lend money to one of my people among you who is poor, you must not act as a creditor to him. You are not to charge him interest. If you take your neighbor's cloak as collateral, return it to him by sunset, because his cloak is the only covering he has for his body. What else will he sleep in? And if he cries out to me, I will hear, for I am compassionate. You must not blaspheme God or curse the ruler of your people. You must not hold back offerings from your granaries or vats. You are to give me the firstborn of your sons. You shall do likewise with your cattle and your sheep. Let them stay with their mothers for 7 days, but on the 8th day you are to give them to me. You are to be my holy people. You must not eat the meat of a mauled animal found in the field. You are to throw it to the dogs. Oh, that's interesting. That last one is interesting, like, because I've actually seen situations. I think people that I've known, maybe even my brother-in-law, like when somebody hits a deer on the road or something like that, when you're driving, it's like, what do? Do you just throw it on the side of the road, or do you, take it with you and butcher it, save the meat or whatever? But it's interesting that they have a law about that in Exodus. Although this specifically says meat of a mauled animal. So like one that's been killed by a wild animal, probably. But it's interesting. I was just talking about this, not this stuff specifically, but things related to the Old Testament law with another friend on his stream. We were talking a little bit about how much of this law is supposed to be still followed, to the letter, like today, versus like the new law that Jesus implemented. Because really there's two covenants. There's the Mosaic covenant, and then Jesus fulfilled the law, and he made a new covenant by his blood, and kind of simplified the law in a sense, but he didn't abolish it. He didn't get rid of it. He just fulfilled it. But it's not super clear to me. You have to do quite a bit of study to figure out which things are supposed to be followed these days versus, which stuff was the Jewish law that he, changed or whatever. It's hard to even know how to describe that in proper English, because it's not that he changed it, but generally speaking, in the New Testament times, which we live in now, we're not necessarily expected to follow all of these specific things. But yeah, I don't claim to have a full understanding of that. It's a little bit confusing to me. But anyway, let's go on to Exodus chapter 23. You shall not spread a false report. Do not join the wicked by being a malicious witness. You shall not follow the crowd in wrongdoing. When you testify in a lawsuit, do not pervert justice by siding with the crowd. And do not show favoritism to a poor man in his lawsuit. If you encounter your enemy's stray ox or donkey, you must return it to him. If you see the donkey of one who hates you fallen under its load, do not leave it there. You must help him with it. You shall not deny justice to the poor in their lawsuits. Stay far away from a false accusation. Do not kill the innocent or the just, for I will not acquit the guilty. Do not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds those who see and twists the words of the righteous. Do not oppress a foreign resident, since you yourselves know how it feels to be foreigners, for you were foreigners in the land of Egypt. For 6 years you are to sow your land and gather its produce, but in the 7th year you must let it rest and lie fallow, so that the poor among your people may eat from the field, and the wild animals may consume what they leave. Do the same with your vineyard and olive grove. For 6 days you are to do your work, but on the 7th day you must cease, so that your ox and your donkey may rest, and the son of your maidservant may be refreshed, as well as the foreign resident. Pay close attention to everything I have said to you. You must not invoke the names of other gods. They must not be heard on your lips. 3 times a year you are to celebrate a feast to me. You are to keep the feast of unleavened bread as I commanded you. At the appointed time in the month of Abib, you are to eat unleavened bread for 7 days, because that was the month you came out of Egypt. No one may appear before me empty-handed. You are also to keep the feast of harvest with the first fruits of the produce from what you sow in the field, and keep the feast of ingathering at the end of the year when you gather your produce from the field. 3 times a year, all your males are to appear before the Lord God. You must not offer the blood of my sacrifices with anything leavened, nor may the fat of my feast remain until morning. Bring the best of the first fruits of your soil to the house of the Lord your God. You must not cook a young goat in its mother's milk. Behold, I am sending an angel before you to protect you along the way and to bring you to the place I have prepared. Pay attention to him and listen to his voice. Do not defy him, for he will not forgive rebellion, since my name is in him. But if you will listen carefully to his voice and do everything I say, I will be an enemy to your enemies and a foe to your foes. For my angel will go before you and bring you into the land of the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Canaanites, Hivites, and Jebusites, and I will annihilate them. You must not bow down to their gods or serve them or follow their practices. Instead, you are to demolish them and smash their sacred stones to pieces. So you shall serve the Lord your God, and he will bless your bread and your water, and I will take away sickness from among you. No woman in your land will miscarry or be barren. I will fulfill the number of your days. I will send my terror ahead of you and throw into confusion every nation you encounter. I will make all your enemies turn and run. I will send the hornet before you to drive the Hivites and Canaanites and Hittites out of your way. I will not drive them out before you in a single year, otherwise the land would become desolate and wild animals would multiply against you. Little by little I will drive them out ahead of you until you become fruitful and possess the land. And I will establish your borders from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines and from the desert to the Euphrates. For I will deliver the inhabitants into your hand, and you will drive them out before you. You shall make no covenant with them or with their gods. They must not remain in your land, lest they cause you to sin against me. For if you serve their gods, it will surely be a snare to you. Yeah, this stuff is actually really interesting to me to read. Like, some people might find it a little bit boring or laborious to read a list of laws, but I see, the character of God revealed quite a bit through the things that he commands. You can definitely see how much he cares for his people, especially those who are less fortunate, like, the foreigners who live in the land and the widows and orphans and things like that. These days, that some of that stuff is like a hot topic, politically speaking, but if you separate it from that, then you understand what God is talking about. But once again, like, I think it would be pretty difficult. I've never done a study on this, but it would be pretty difficult to figure out which parts of this law are supposed to be eternal and passed on forever versus just things that were made for Israel as a nation, because it's very clear some of these laws relate very specifically to Israel and what they're about to do when they go into Canaan. So obviously we myself, I'm American. I don't have to consider those things in my daily life, but some of the stuff is quite applicable to a modern situation. I think the spirit of the law doesn't change, like the concepts, the love that you share for your neighbor and fairness and not cheating your neighbor and stealing and all that kind of stuff. Obviously that carries over into a modern context. But yeah, it would be I wonder if anyone's really taken it apart item by item, like statute by statute, and decided this is no longer applicable, and these ones. That would be so hard to do, and it's kind of dangerous because if you're wrong, you're interpreting God's law incorrectly. I don't think I would really want to try to do that myself, but it is interesting nonetheless to think about that a little bit. But it's very clear when we read a little bit later in the New Testament, after we get through the Gospels, we're going to get into Acts. And in that book, the early church starts coming across these issues. They become really real for them because the church started in Israel. So you could say that's why we talk about sometimes in America we have a Judeo-Christian heritage. It just means, because Christianity was birthed out of Israel and Judaism, and so there's a lot of carryover from that. And however, when God made it clear that the gospel and Jesus were not just for Israel, and that he died for everybody everywhere, and that his message was to be preached in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the utmost stretches or parts of the world, everywhere. And he made it clear that it's no longer a Jewish religion. And then there became conflicts in the church, the early church, where the Jewish Christians thought that it was important to continue their Jewish traditions alongside in the church. And so there was conflict between the Gentiles or Greeks or whatever you want to call them, anyone who's not Jewish. And so the apostles in Acts have to decide some of this stuff that I was just talking about, what still applies to everybody and what is just Jewish tradition or whatever. So they kind of solved some of that, and I generally feel at peace with what we've determined in modern times, what is still important to obey in God's law. But it isn't super clear. It's not like there's this list of rules anymore that Christians have to follow. It's more like gets to the heart of the law rather than the specific things that to do and not do and stuff like that. But anyway, I think it's important to think about and study. But I can't say that I've done a super thorough search on all that stuff. I generally trust just what I understand from the New Testament. When the New Testament doesn't really go into that much detail as far as, Exodus 24:13, let's split that in half. This part, is just Jewish tradition. This part is still important. That's not explained anywhere. So anyway, I find this stuff interesting just from that perspective, though. Like, right now, I'm not bored at all with it. I'm sort of like in the back of my mind thinking like, I wonder, it's cool how this reveals God's heart also, and then Jewish tradition versus the church and all that stuff. So that's kind of what I'm thinking as I'm reading. But let's keep going. Exodus chapter 24. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Come up to the Lord, you and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of Israel's elders, and you are to worship at a distance. Moses alone shall approach the Lord, but the others must not come near, and the people may not go up with him." When Moses came and told the people all the words and ordinances of the Lord, they all responded with one voice, "All the words that the Lord has spoken we will do." And Moses wrote down all the words of the Lord. Early the next morning he got up and built an altar at the base of the mountain, along with 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. Then he sent out some young men of Israel, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed young bulls as peace offerings to the Lord. Moses took half of the blood and put it in bowls, and the other half he sprinkled on the altar. Then he took the book of the covenant and read it to the people, who replied, "All that the Lord has spoken we will do, and we will be obedient." So Moses took the blood, sprinkled it on the people, and said, "This is the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words." Then Moses went up with Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and they saw the God of Israel. Under his feet was a work like a pavement made of sapphire, as clear as the sky itself. But God did not lay his hand on the nobles of Israel. They saw him, and they ate and drank. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Come up to me on the mountain and stay here, so that I may give you the tablets of stone with the law and commandments I have written for their instruction." So Moses set out with Joshua his attendant and went up on the mountain of God. And he said to the elders, "Wait here for us until we return to you. Aaron and Hur are here with you. Whoever has a dispute can go to them." When Moses went up on the mountain, the cloud covered it, and the glory of the Lord settled on Mount Sinai. For 6 days the cloud covered it, and on the 7th day the Lord called to Moses from within the cloud. And the sight of the glory of the Lord was like a consuming fire on the mountaintop in the eyes of the Israelites. Moses entered the cloud as he went up on the mountain, and he remained on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. This is really fascinating. It's interesting to me because I just watched a video. I talked about it in one of my recent streams that they have a theory. They think they might know where Mount Sinai is. And now that I'm reading this, a lot of the details really do line up quite well with that place over in Saudi Arabia that they think where it might be. As I'm remembering that video and the landmarks that they showed, I was like, whoa, yeah, it does sound quite compelling. So it kind of makes this come alive. But if you're interested in that, check out Mount Sinai Expedition Bible on YouTube. That should probably bring it up. It's a pretty cool video. They don't claim to know for sure. It's just more of a theory because it's been so long that they don't really know exactly where the mountain is. But anyway, find it pretty interesting. The other thing, I don't remember this part. I mean, I've read through the Bible a bunch of times, but it's been a long time since I've read through Exodus. I didn't remember that Moses went up Mount Sinai with Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, 70 elders, and they saw the God of Israel. Under his feet was a work like a pavement made of sapphire, as clear as the sky itself. I totally didn't remember that description from reading it in the past. That's interesting. One thing that's kind of weird about descriptions of God in the Bible is it's not always 100% clear whether what's being described is actually God or if it's like an angel messenger of some kind, because it says in several verses that no man has seen God, and if you did see him, you would die because his holiness is too much for people to observe, or I don't really understand fully, but and then it says here that they saw God, so it sounds like a contradiction, but I sometimes wonder what that really means, if they truly saw God or just a representation. It's hard to know for sure. But yeah, I didn't remember reading that before. All right. So now we're into the New Testament stuff. Got like three passages, kind of half chapters, I think. So let's do that, and then I'll be done for the day. So Matthew 14. So if you don't know how the Bible works, like I don't know who's watching these streams, but sometimes when I say the passages at the beginning, I just feel like I'm just saying a bunch of numbers, but it's familiar to me because I've grown up in the church and stuff. But so the first number that you see before the colon is chapter, so it's Matthew chapter 14, and then the second set of numbers is the verses. So when you hear me say something like Matthew 14, 13 to 36, it's like basically saying Matthew chapter 14, verses 13 to 36, but most people don't say all that stuff. And actually, in the original manuscripts of the Bible, there were no verses or chapters. So when they translated into English and other languages, they added those numbers just to make it easier to reference things. That's why you call it a reference. It's basically just a way to point to very specific locations in the Bible. But the original Bible did not have those in it. Just in case people don't know that. But it's very helpful because then, if you want to talk about something specific, you can just say that number and it's always going to be the same in every Bible, generally speaking. So, okay, so let's go on with Matthew. When Jesus heard about John, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. But the crowds found out about it and followed him on foot from the towns. When he stepped ashore and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. When evening came, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a desolate place, and the hour is already late. Dismiss the crowds so they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food." "They do not need to go away," Jesus replied. "You give them something to eat." "We have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish," they answered. "Bring them here to me," Jesus said. And he directed the crowds to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he spoke a blessing. Then he broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. About 5,000 men were fed, in addition to women and children. Immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. After he had sent them away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But the boat was already far from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. During the 4th watch of the night, Jesus went out to them, walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus spoke up at once. "Take courage, it is I. Do not be afraid." "Lord, if it is you," Peter replied, "command me to come to you on the water." "Come," said Jesus. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the strength of the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and took hold of Peter. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they had climbed back into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." When they had crossed over, they landed at Gennesaret, and when the men of that place recognized Jesus, they sent word to all the surrounding region. People brought all the sick to him and begged him just to let them touch the fringe of his cloak, and all who touched him were healed. Okay, so let's go on to Mark chapter 6, verses 30 to 56. Meanwhile, the apostles gathered around Jesus and brought him news of all they had done and taught. And he said to them, "Come with me privately to a solitary place, and let us rest for a while." For many people were coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat. So they went away in a boat by themselves to a solitary place. But many people saw them leaving and recognized them. They ran together on foot from all the towns and arrived before them. When Jesus stepped ashore and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. By now the hour was already late, so the disciples came to Jesus and said, "This is a desolate place, and the hour is already late. Dismiss the crowds so they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat." But Jesus told them, "You give them something to eat." They asked him, "Should we go out and spend 200 denarii to give all of them bread to eat?" "Go and see how many loaves you have," he told them. And after checking, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then Jesus directed them to have the people sit in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties. Taking the 5 loaves and 2 fish and looking up to heaven, Jesus spoke a blessing and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples to set before the people, and he divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. And there were 5,000 men who had eaten the loaves. Immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to Bethsaida while he dismissed the crowd. After bidding them farewell, he went up on the mountain to pray. When evening came, the boat was in the middle of the sea, and Jesus was alone on land. He could see that the disciples were straining to row because the wind was against them. About the 4th watch of the night, Jesus went out to them walking on the sea. He intended to pass by them, but when they saw him walking on the sea, they cried out, thinking he was a ghost. For they all saw him and were terrified. But Jesus spoke up at once. "Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid." Then he climbed into the boat with them, and the wind died down, and the disciples were utterly astounded, for they had not understood about the loaves, but their hearts had been hardened. When they had crossed over, they landed at Gennesaret and moored the boat. As soon as they got out of the boat, the people recognized Jesus and ran through that whole region, carrying the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was. And wherever he went, villages and towns and countrysides, they laid the sick in the marketplaces and begged him just to let them touch the fringe of his cloak, and all who touched him were healed. I found it kind of funny that I don't remember this little bit, but as Jesus was walking on water, it said that he intended to pass by them, so he was just like gonna go across, and cross the sea and go to the other side. Wasn't really gonna stop and do anything related to the disciples, but when they saw him, he had to, I guess he changed his plans. It was like, I imagine him going, "Oh shoot, I was trying to sneak by these guys." I'm sure that's not how it went, but it's funny sounding. It's like, "Oh, those guys in the boat, yeah, let's keep walking and go to the other side." And then they're like, "Oh, it's a ghost." And he's like, oh yeah, no, it's me. But yeah, it's kind of funny. Paleo, thanks for the lemon. All right, so got one more chunk here from Luke. I feel like it's been a while since I've read from Luke. I've probably been reading all this time, but I feel like we've been reading a lot of Matthew or something, but probably been reading Luke also. I just don't have a good memory. So Luke chapter 9, verses 1 through 17. Then Jesus called the 12 together and gave them power and authority over all demons and power to cure diseases. And he sent them out to proclaim the kingdom of God and to heal the sick. Take nothing for the journey, he told them. No staff, no bag, no bread, no money, no second tunic. Whatever house you enter, stay there until you leave that area. If anyone does not welcome you, shake the dust off your feet when you leave that town as a testimony against them. So they set out and went from village to village, preaching the gospel and healing people everywhere. When Herod the Tetrarch heard about all that was happening, he was perplexed. For some were saying that John had risen from the dead, others that Elijah had appeared, and still others that a prophet of old had arisen. I beheaded John, Herod said, but who is this man I hear such things about? And he kept trying to see Jesus. Then the apostles returned and reported to Jesus all that they had done. Taking them away privately, he withdrew to a town called Bethsaida. But the crowds found out and followed him. He welcomed them and spoke to them about the kingdom of God, and he healed those who needed healing. As the day neared its end, the 12 came to Jesus and said, "Dismiss the crowd so they can go to the surrounding villages and countryside for lodging and provisions. For we are in a desolate place here." But Jesus told them, "You give them something to eat." "We have only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish," they answered, "unless we go and buy food for all these people." There were about 5,000 men. He told his disciples, "Have them sit down in groups of about 50 each." They did so, and everyone was seated. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, Jesus spoke a blessing and broke them. Then he gave them to the disciples to set before the people. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. There's some things that are mentioned in the Bible that feel like they assume the reader will just understand them, but they're kind of a little bit poetic or cryptic or something. Like, just as an example, so after Jesus fed the 5,000 people by miraculously breaking apart the bread and fish, that was obviously not enough to feed that many people, but he magically, it's the wrong word, magically, but it's just a word we have in English, but he made it multiply, more than it could possibly do, so that everybody had enough and there was massive leftovers. After that is when they went into the sea, like the disciples went earlier because Jesus was up on the mountain praying, and I guess he instructed them to go there or something. I can't remember, but anyway, so that's when Jesus walked on the water, and the disciples were fearful because they thought he was a ghost, but they were also afraid because there was a storm, and so Jesus, after he walked on the water, and Peter said, "If it's you, call me out to you so I walk on the water too," which is a massive demonstration of faith, because I don't even know why Peter would say that. He could have just waited, said, "Hey, Jesus, come over in the boat." But I guess they were still afraid. They thought he was a ghost, so that was kind of Peter's test. But it really took faith, because why would he even think Jesus could do that? And if he did think that Jesus could also give Peter the ability, then why would he disbelieve anything else? But anyway, Jesus said that they have no faith. And all of that to say, This is the part that sounds kind of cryptic, or it's like, wait, what? Huh? So he climbed into the boat with them, and the wind died down, and the disciples were utterly astounded, for they had not understood about the loaves, but their hearts had been hardened. It's like, because even from a reader's standpoint, it's not really clear what that means. I know that theologians have dissected all of these verses, and they have explanations for everything, but just at a cursory read, it just makes you go, wait, what? Huh? Like, for they had not understood about the loaves. Like, what I get out of that is, and I don't know if this is correct, but basically, if Jesus can miraculously make a small amount of loaves and fish multiply, there's really nothing that he can't do. So why would you be surprised that he walks on water, calms a storm? That's kind of what I get from it. So it's like, why do you have so little faith and disbelief that I can do these crazy things? You just saw me do something crazy. So what's different about this? That's kind of how I read it, but I think there's a deeper meaning, possibly than that. And I've heard sermons on a lot of this kind of stuff, but my memory's so bad, I just kind of I lose it. But anyway, let's see. And I read this right. Yeah. All right. So yeah, that's it for today. So we got 5 days to read. I mean, we got 7 days to read 5 readings this week. So I don't know if I'll go straight through the first 5 days and have the last 2 off or what. I never know what I'm going to do. I don't have a set schedule. I like the flexibility that this reading plan gives me, so I can miss a couple days and not get behind. That's kind of, I think it's an awesome, this is the best reading plan I've ever used for that reason, because every time I try a yearly reading plan that has readings every day, I somehow miss a day or two, and then all of a sudden that happens 2 or 3 times, and I'm so far behind that I just give up. But this one is cool because it only has 5 readings per week, and so it's more manageable. Even though you have to read more each day that way, it still feels less likely that I'm going to get lost. So I'm enjoying it. Hopefully somebody that's watching these videos is also enjoying it. And cool thing is, if you actually watch all these videos, you'll also read the whole Bible this year. You don't even have to do anything. But I understand it's very unlikely that somebody's going to watch all of these videos. But they are, I'm actually streaming on 8 or 9 platforms, including Rumble and Odyssey and YouTube. And on those 3 platforms, they get stored as replays or VODs, whatever you want to call them, permanent videos. And technically, I'm not streaming on Odyssey anymore because their technology doesn't work, but I am uploading the replays there also. So anyway, that's it for today. Tomorrow, or whenever I read next, we got more simple set of passages: Exodus 25 to 27 and John chapter 6. That sounds a lot shorter than what we read today, but maybe some of those chapters have more verses in it. Anyway, yep. Let's see, anything else I have to talk about? I don't know. Oh, I talked to my parents today. I've been realizing that I don't talk to anybody at all ever anymore, because I moved away from where all my friends and family live. So nobody that I know personally lives close to me right now. So I don't have any friends, family, whatever. So the only time I talk to any humans at all is if somebody visits me from out of town, or I call somebody, and I don't really call people anymore. So it's pretty rare that I talk to humans anymore. I'm pretty isolated, and so that was nice to have a conversation. It's mostly me complaining about how much my life sucks, but but it's nice to have somebody to talk to from time to time. and they're good listeners and encouragers. So I appreciate that. Anyway, so I guess maybe I feel slightly better today, and maybe even though I look like I'm about to fall asleep because I am kind of tired, I do feel more encouraged to at least be able to talk to somebody. So that's good. Still no leads on the job stuff. Still looking, but anyway, that's about it. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time, whenever that ends up being. Catch you later.